Hey y'all, I'm back. Let's continue our conversation about David, one of my favorite Bible characters. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 18, and last week we talked about the big story in chapter 17 of David and Goliath, a famous Bible story. So David killed Goliath. Nobody expected that, but with the help of God, he did. And at the end of chapter 17, David was still walking around with Goliath's head in his hand. He was talking to King Saul, and he had his head still in his hand. And chapter 18 opens up and says that after Saul and David finished talking, Jonathan became one in the spirit with David. I love those words. It shows a godly connection. And I love godly connections. God has given me a few throughout my life, and they have been such a blessing to me. Godly connections is when when God places someone in your life, and it could be for a lifetime. It could be for a particular time in your life, on a temporary basis. It varies, but whatever time length it is, it's a blessing because God knows, even when we can't see when we may need. God knows that there's a need, and there was a need for David. There are some things coming around the corner that we're going to read about in this chapter, but God knew that David would need somebody to pray, to be there, there as a companion. It's some things that he'll place somebody in our lives who have experience in certain areas where we don't, or has wisdom about certain things that we don't. Maybe they've gone through what we're about to go through. Who knows? That's why it's a godly connection, because we don't know. So Jonathan is Saul's son, and the Bible says God put them together as a godly connection. Well, the Bible says that Jonathan became one in the spirit, and he loved David as he loved his own self. And I think that's beautiful. What a beautiful friendship this is in 1 Samuel. I love this story. So around the corner come these things. Now David has defeated Goliath. Great victory. He's on top of the world. He's famous. The Bible says that women came from the villages of Israel, and they began to sing. King Saul has killed his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Well, Saul was like, excuse me, he's the king. He's the warrior. He's the one that the women always sing about. But now David was in the picture, and he had killed the giant Goliath. So, of course, their songs were going to be different now. And Saul was jealous, point blank. He was jealous, and that's something that came around the corner. Because who wants to be the object of jealousy for the king? Nobody, right? Because the king has all this power, and he can do away with you very easily. So Saul was jealous of David. Not a good thing, not a good look. We see that in chapter 18 that Saul has an evil spirit. Again, remember he was getting, some evil spirits when David would come play the harp for him, and then those evil spirits would go away. So now he got an evil spirit, and he decided when he had this evil spirit that he wanted to throw a spear at David. He was, after his life. And so he threw the spear, and David was able to, with the help of God, avoid the spear twice. So it's just crazy. And Saul saw when he was able to avoid him twice, that the Lord is with him. He probably saw that when he killed the giant as well. Like he got something with him, somebody with him, and it's the Lord. So the Bible says that Saul was afraid of him. And that's another thing that we know is not of God. fear. And it mentions several times in chapter 18 that Saul was afraid of David. God was with him, and he no longer was with Saul. So he was afraid of him. He was afraid of him because of his success, because of all these things he was doing, was happening to David. Saul says anybody will give him the kingdom with all this success. So he thought of ways to bring him down. And he, like I said, tried to kill him. He did this, he did that. Finally, he said, I'm just going to let the Philistines kill him because he can't win every war. But that's just what happened. He would go out to fight the Philistines and he would win. All he did was win, no matter what. and then he tried to give David one of his daughters. And David said, "No, I'm just a poor man. I can't, get one of your daughters. I can't be your son-in-law." And then his daughter Michal was in love with David. And Saul said, "Come on, just be my son-in-law." And David, he was, I think the concern was the bride price. There was a price that a man who was going to marry a woman had to pay, even to the king, apparently. And David was hesitant because he didn't have no money. So King Saul said, "Oh, okay, if the problem is money, I don't require that you give me money or, sheep or cattle, whatever it is that, they would require. I just want you to go defeat some Philistines." And I forgot the number, but it's a number. We're going to look, if you look down in chapter 18, it says a number of Philistines that he wanted him to defeat, and he wanted him to present their foreskins to him. And that sounded like just a crazy request, even for David, who killed the giant. It sounded like a crazy request, but David was happy because he didn't have any money, but he knew that with God, he had the confidence in God that he could get those, kill those Philistines and get those foreskins. And that's exactly what he did. And again, the Bible says Saul was afraid. Like, what in the world? So certainly we're going to read on in chapter 19 how Jonathan was a benefit as a connection. He was the son of Saul, and Saul had it out for David. So he needs, his son as a friend, as an ally, as a companion, is going to prove beneficial to him, in the days to come. But thank God who gives us what we need. Thank God for godly connections. Thank God for protection when people are jealous, when people are suffering from evil spirits, when people are afraid or envious of us, how God protects. So that's a blessing. So remember, when you see God present you with a godly connection, a lot of people say, I used to say, I don't need no new friends, But when God presents a godly connection, you never know what it's for. So always be open to it. Well, I'm excited to talk even more next week. Go into chapter 19 of the story of David and find out some more things that we could use to apply to our lives that God did through David. All right, so I love you guys. See you next week. Bye.